So today we are going to visit Livorno. I've marked 3 places on the map. I'm actually coming to you from just southwest of Florence, that little map, the dot in the middle on the map, the orange dot. And then I've been spending a lot of time at the farm called Sagona lately because we're working on our olive oil harvest, which is impending. And so I've been down there a lot. I'm going to show you all a couple pictures of those places, and then we're going to go visit Livorno. We're going to see the city, talk about a Livornese artist, and then we're going to make 3 recipes that are very traditional to Livorno. So this is where I am, just southwest of Florence at the Castle of Poppiano. My house is there on the bottom right, kind of very rural area, lots of olives and vines. And this is where the farm called Sagona is located. So I think I've mentioned to y'all that I'm collaborating with this farm. We make wine and olive oil. I'm kind of helping out on the olive oil end. And this is one of our groves you see there on the left, kind of with this view down into the Arno River Valley. So we're going to make 3 oils this year. We have 3 different olive groves, and we're going to make 3 different oils from our 3 groves, as opposed to just making a blend, which is what we did last year. So every year it's kind of different depending on how the olives look, and they're beautiful, as you can see. So let's jump on over to the coast, to Livorno. So we're on the Tyrrhenian Sea. We're actually in that big bay called the Mar Ligure, the Ligurian Sea. This is what Livorno looked like in the year 1400. So it's this tiny, very small little town. You can practically count the number of houses, and this map is probably very realistic. And there's a big fort right here, currently called La Fortezza Vecchia, the old fort. So in this period, the medieval period, Livorno is literally a tiny fishing village, and they're kind of the southern end of the major port of Pisa. Pisa, during that medieval period, 1200s to 1400s, is the major maritime empire in the Mediterranean. So Livorno was nothing but a fishing village with a bastion, which was the very southern end of the port of Pisa. Pisa's influence started to wane. Florence, which has always been a strong power, they're a very important city-state ruled by the Medici. So we're in the 1400s now, and the Medici need a port. The Florentines hate the Pisans, and they always have. And so the Florentines do not want to pay duties to Pisa for goods that are going out or goods that are coming in. And so they're finally like, you know what, we're done with you guys. We're building our own port. They bought Livorno, okay? So the city of Florence, city-state of Florence, paid 100,000 florins to purchase Livorno. And they are going to just make their own port. And that's what they do. So they start by refortifying the very, very old Fortezza Vecchia, which is still there today, and you can go and see it. It's really beautiful. There are just layers of structures from the 1200s to the 1500s, and you can kind of, you know, it's really cool just kind of explore around, and you get great views of the city and out over the port. And then as the Medici family grew in importance in the 1500s. By now, they're it's the Grand Duchy of Tuscany. They decide they're really going to go for it, and they redesign the fortifications of Livorno and populate the city. So what they do is they send their architect to not put in a new set of walls. He actually puts in a huge moat right here. You can see it's called the Fosso Reale. So this, instead of putting in walls, the city's huge, it's outgrown that obviously, but back in the day, this was instead of the walls. And then they put in a new fort. So they fortified the old port, La Fortezza Vecchia, which is here, and they put in a new fort, which you can see in the inset, and it's right here, La Fortezza Nuova. And the whole area around that is full of canals, and so that it's actually a neighborhood today called Il Quartiere Nuova Venezia, New Venice, because it's sort of similar to Venice in that the streets are all of these canals with the boats going up and down. They also literally populated the city. They brought in maritime trading companies, merchants. They had people coming in, foreign nationals from all over the place. This was the major port in the Mediterranean. It's still one of the most important ports in the Mediterranean. So they brought in all of these kind of foreign nationals to do business and establish commerce coming in and out of this port. They also brought in, they encouraged immigration of the Sephardic Jewish population from the Iberian Peninsula. So these are folks, we're in the mid-1500s, they're being persecuted by the Spanish Inquisition. The Grand Duke of Tuscany said, come to Livorno. They offered them citizenship. So keep in mind, these other people, the English foreign nationals who came in remained foreign nationals, the French, the Greeks, whomever, they all kept their own nationality. This group of Jews that was literally asked to come in, they were given citizenship. They were also given the right to live freely in Livorno. They were not asked to live in a ghetto, as they were in Rome, also Venice, and in most cities in Europe. In Livorno, they were not separated in the ghetto. Livorno is all about inclusion, always has been, still is. They also gave not just the Jews, but anybody who lived in Livorno had the right to practice their own religion. And it was a free port. So this was, they were trying to do everything possible to encourage commerce and trade here in this town and kind of make it easy for people to move here, live in this town and set up their businesses. So you've ended up then with this multicultural, multi-ethnic city from the 1500s, and that really still informs the vibe of the city today. So now there are about 200,000 residents. Livorno is the provincial capital, huge, enormous commercial port. And everybody who lives there is open-minded. They have this sense of inclusion. They're just nice, laid back, easygoing people. They're known all over Italy for just being, you know, super fun to hang out with. They have this kind of particular accent. They have a whole set of funny expressions that just make people crack up laughing. They're super funny, quick-witted, and really ironic. And they'll make fun of you at the drop of a hat. So it's just kind of, they're fun people to hang out with. Even just, you know, I went over there to buy fish yesterday and they were making me laugh. So that's Livorno today. So we have seen the Fortezza Vecchia. We're going to see the Fortezza Nuova, the fish market, and the house of the artist Amedeo Modigliani, who's right here. So let's just take a quick look at the city. Because it is such an important port, it was just hammered, unfortunately, in World War II. So you're looking here at the main piazza before and then right after bombing in World War II. It was rebuilt, obviously. It looks kind of nice and shiny. So there's a lot of new construction mixed with old construction in Livorno because of the war damage. But they've got nice big open piazzas. It's sunny. It's in a very pleasant town, even though a lot of it's sort of new construction. This is the main street, you know, the new version on the right. Not quite as charming as it used to be. The Quartiere Venezia, though, the kind of Venice neighborhood, has maintained all of its charm. It's just great. So you can see the one of the bastions of the Fortezza Nuova there on the right. And then at night, this is a couple of shots just taken at night in the Quartiere Venezia. It's full of restaurants, bars, theaters, really fun. Everybody's out having, you know, eating fish, seaside, canal side, I guess. It's really just a great place to, nice evening out. And then just down the coast from Livorno is this particular area of coastline called I Scogli. And the Livornese love to go to the beach. So as soon as everybody gets out of work, they all jet down to the Scogli and have a dip in the ocean. And my friends and I actually do the same thing. It's not that far from where we live. So sometimes when the weather's nice, when you're done with work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you can jet over to Livorno, take it, at least it's like the high dive and the low dive over here. Jump into the water and have a swim. It's gorgeous. And then the sun, of course, goes down right there. It's the West Coast. So you can have a nice cocktail and enjoy the end of the day. All right, we're going to talk about a Livornese born artist called Amedeo Modigliani. And here you're seeing, this is his studio in Paris, and he is with his companion, Jean Ebutterne, who's also a painter. And they work together in this studio in Paris. I'm going to start off with the bad news, okay? Just get that out of the way so we don't have to talk about it later. Modigliani was born in Livorno. He suffered from tuberculosis. His health was poor his whole life, and he died at age 35. And he kind of knew his health was poor. He knew that there was no cure for this, and he really kind of lived life to the fullest. And so he died at age 35. His companion, Jean, was so distraught. She was pregnant with her second child. She actually jumped out of a 5th-story window the day after he died. So that's kind of the bad news here, is that this, great, passionate artist and love affair came to this kind of abrupt end. But he really did live a brief life, but very intense life, and his art shows that. He was celebrated by the artists of Montparnasse and Montmartre, who he hung out with in Paris. So think of this as, all the Cubists and Fauvists and Picasso and blah, blah, blah. He had no money, so his buddies took up a collection to give him a funeral. They gave him this massive funeral, paraded his casket covered in flowers all throughout the city from Montparnasse, where they were living, to Père Lachaise Cemetery, and hundreds of people were following them. Apparently, even the policemen were coming to the corner and saluting the casket. These are the same policemen who were shutting down his exhibitions of, scandalous nudes, shortly prior to this. So it's kind of interesting that they really all loved this figure, Modigliani. He was a big guy in town, and everybody knew about him. And his artist friends remarked that he was a true creative spirit. He was a great artist, and he lived his life fully dedicated to his artistic ideal. So we'll take a look at his brief career. So now you kind of know how it ends, so it won't be so sort of disappointing when you hear about it later. It is sad, but look at the art he created, and it's really joyous. So here he is as a young man. He's born in Livorno in 1884. And he was born to a Sephardic Jewish family, one of these families, descendants of one of these families that had been asked to come in the 1500s by the Grand Duchy of Tuscany. His father was a merchant. His mother was an intellectual. She was an art critic. She founded a school. And she really ended up homeschooling him because he was so sickly as a child that he actually spent a lot of time at home. But she was, perfectly capable of making sure that he was well educated. He also was kind of just, born artistic talent, and asked his mother to take him to see the old masters in Florence, and she did. So he saw Masaccio, Giotto, Botticelli, Michelangelo, Leonardo, all of that. And he saw that firsthand as a young person. And she got him art lessons. So this is by now we're sort of 1890s into the 1890s in Livorno, and this is the main style. It is kind of the Italian version of Impressionism, practiced by a group of artists called the Macchiaioli, and the main proponent was Giovanni Fattori, and he was living in Livorno, and he had a sort of school of artists that he had trained in Livorno. So that's where Modigliani got his first artistic training. He then, so this is the painting here in the middle is Modigliani, 1899. It's called the Tuscan Road. You can see he's kind of learned this impressionistic style, and he is an excellent draftsman. These are two drawings that Modigliani did. The left, you're looking at a self-portrait, and clearly as a young boy, and he's such an artistic talent. And then on the right is a portrait that he did when he was taking lessons there in about 1899, 1900 in Livorno. So he's clearly got a great eye for portraiture, and is very capable at rendering the human form realistically. I mean, it's almost photographic, the naturalism he's given to the subject. After his sort of first lessons in Livorno, he goes to the Fine Arts Academy in Florence for a year. He then goes and spends a couple of years at the Fine Arts Academy in Venice. And then age 22, he decides to go to Paris because he knows that's the hub of avant-garde art, and he wants to be in the thick of that. So he ends up in Paris. And just get this out of the way too, because he's kind of got a reputation. So he moves to Paris, and he kind of falls in, obviously, with like-minded people. So all of these sort of young intellectuals. He's a very good-looking 25-year-old Italian artist in Paris, and he's hanging out with this intellectual, artistic crowd. And they're drinking absinthe and smoking hash. I think they were smoking opium. This is kind of going around. So Modigliani's got a reputation for partying and also for womanizing, but he was not partying any more than any of his colleagues were. He happened to be destitute, had no family money, and his health was poor. So there was that. That kind of compounded his sort of destitute bohemian reputation. But his colleagues even said, we were all in there together, basically. So he gets to Paris, and he rents a room in Montmartre where, kind of a group of poor artists are living. And he meets and sees the works of art of Renoir, Degas, Gauguin, Matisse, and Picasso are running around. They're literally hanging out, drinking absinthe in Montmartre. And the art that he saw that affected him the most in this period, he's, again, a very young man, he's 22 years old. He really liked Toulouse-Lautrec, you can see on the left here. That very kind of graphic line really grabbed Modigliani, and he absolutely was taken with Cezanne. Cezanne died the year that he got to Paris, and there was a great retrospective exhibition of Cezanne's work. So he kind of immersed himself in the work of Cezanne. So these are the first works that Modigliani created when he was in Paris. And you can really see he's kind of under the influence of Toulouse-Lautrec with that female portrait on the left, and then of Cezanne with the two paintings on the right. So he and his fellow artists are in Paris in 1907 are looking for ways to express their own ideal visions of beauty and the human spirit. So they're no longer constricted by the structure of academic painting, the way that Modigliani was schooled, right? So he grew up looking at Botticelli. He went to the Fine Arts Academy in Florence, the Fine Arts Academy in Venice, but he really did not, he was not stuck in that kind of academic system. So these artists, the avant-garde in Paris, had just kind of burst out of that. And this, of course, started with Impressionism and Monet and Manet. So this has been going on for 50 years now by the time that Modigliani arrives in Paris. Of course, you know, it starts as a small movement before it really bursts out onto the scene. So these guys, instead of having to, use invisible brushwork to represent very noble subject matter and create perfect perspective, they were free from all of that. They also didn't work on commission. So these guys, they didn't have somebody to tell them they had to paint an allegory of, Venus in time, for example. We've seen some paintings in this series of things like that. They could actually choose to paint whatever they wanted. Cezanne paints two men playing cards, and Modigliani's got a guy playing the cello. The guy on the right, by the way, is an art dealer who immediately took note of what Modigliani was doing. His name's Paul Alexander. So they were free to create the way they wanted to. The idea of perfect perspective, they know how to do that. They were trained that way. They chose to kind of make it wonky on purpose. They're trying to make a point. So that's what all these guys are doing. So Modigliani is kind of trying to, as a young artist, trying to find his own style, as are all these other guys that he's hanging out with, all these artists he's hanging in Paris. And one thing that happens that influences quite a number of them is that they come into contact with African masks and tribal art. And this stuff is pretty common in Paris during this time. Paul Guillaume is another one of these avant-garde art dealers. He actually held an exhibition of some of these African masks, and it made a very big impression on a lot of the artists. Paul Guillaume was also handling works of Brancusi, the sculptor, Picasso, Matisse de Chirico, who was the Italian futurist painter. He was there as well. So all these guys saw these works of art, and it really absolutely kind of pushed their art forward. So on the left, you can see Picasso. This is his 1907 watershed, Demoiselles du Avignon. And this is that great early Cubist painting with clear references to those masks. And then on the right, works of art by Constantine Brancusi. He's a Romanian sculptor. So he's realizing very realistic images in an absolutely new and fresh way, as new and fresh as Picasso, but totally different from Picasso, right? He's going for extreme simplicity. And he even said his goal was to transmit pure joy. He didn't want you to have to sit there and think about it too hard. He just wanted you to feel joy when you saw these pictures. So Modigliani, thanks to Paul Guillaume, saw these masks, and he met Brancusi. And the combination of the African tribal art and meeting Brancusi completely changed his approach to art. So much so that in 1909, Modigliani stopped painting and he started sculpting. So you're looking at a mask that had a type of mask that had particular influence on Modigliani on the left, and then those two objects on the right are Modigliani sculptures. So Modigliani jumped from this to this, okay? So he's hanging out with Paul Guillaume and all these other artists, and he's in the studio of Brancusi, and he's looking at these masks, and he starts sculpting those heads like you see on the right. I mean, to me, that is the word in Italian is a svolto. It's a 180-degree turn. So the mask, the things that kind of grabbed Modigliani about this mask. By the way, Gabon was a French colony during this period, so these objects are coming directly into Paris from the French colony of Gabon. So notice the simplification of the characteristics of the face, the very elegant, elongated face, these stylized eyebrows, those little blank eyes way up high and close together, that very elongated nose with kind of a swoop, this little pursed mouth at the very bottom, and then Modigliani kind of used all of that in his own way, and then he added this very Brancusian attenuated neck, and he's made these extremely elegant, almost like kind of looks like Easter Islandy type figures. I mean, they're just powerful, kind of archaic type god figure. So Modigliani has just come into his own all of a sudden. He's taken everything that he's learned and he is applying it to what is his own style. And it's just really amazing to look at. So he's enthralled by reducing the human form to the simplest shapes possible. So that's what these guys are getting out of the tribal art. And he's also enthralled by removing the superfluous even in his working method. So he chooses to work on stone and wood. He's removing, right? He's chiseling away or whittling away material to leave the bare minimum that he needs to show his image of ideal beauty and ideal human form. He really shunned working in clay. Clay is adding on, he's into removing. And remember, he's just super poor. He's been paying bar tabs with drawings. He's been paying rent with paintings. He's being evicted more than once. So he's actually stealing art supplies at this point. He can't go to the art supply store and just, run up a tab. He literally took stones from a building site in Montparnasse. They have matched the limestone. They can see where, what building project he snatched this piece of stone from. He took a railway tie from a rail line that was going in at Montmartre. I mean, he just had this need to create, and he was just using anything he could get his hands on. Here you can see kind of how the mask on the left has literally influenced a drawing, a sculpture, and then a painting by Modigliani. So Modigliani sculpts from 1909 to 1914, and then the dust produced by working in stone or wood is such that his weakened lungs can't handle it. He just can't do it. And for health reasons, he had to quit. So he had to give up sculpture for his health. And he turns back to painting, but the experience of sculpture and actually actively sculpting really has taught him how to simplify forms, reduce forms to their essence, get to the heart of this human spirit by representing the essential. And his paintings from 1914 until his death really have a different energy, and they reflect what it is that he learned while sculpting. So on the left here, you see, these are all three portraits done by Modigliani of the kind of haughty art dealer, Paul Guillaume on the left, the guy who introduced him to Brancusi. That's Picasso in the middle. Jean Cocteau on the right, he is a poet. He was working with Diaghilev and the Ballet Russe at that time. So there's just, ferment of artistic creativity and these intellectual types in Montparnasse and Montmartre, and Modigliani's right there in the middle of all of that. He knows all these guys. He knows what they're doing. He knows what they're trying to do in their art. He's seen their paintings. There's Fauvism, Cubism, Futurism, Surrealism, it's all over the place. And somebody asked Modigliani, well, which one of these movements does he belong to? And he said he belongs to the Modigliani movement. He was doing his own thing. He was happy to know all these guys. He obviously had great exchanges with them. He was not interested in joining a group. He was loosely, later he was even then loosely grouped with a group of artists, which were more like running buddies than anything else. They were known as les artistes maudits. And they all had a couple things in common. They were all somewhat marginalized, perhaps. This is Kiesling is a Polish Jew. The Jews, they were kind of hanging together, these guys. So Kiesling is from Poland. He lives in the same building that Modigliani does in Montparnasse. And you can see his work is kind of surreal, these surrealist portraits, which are just kind of bizarre to look at. And the guy on the top looks, every time I see that, I'm like, that has got to be Iggy Pop's grandfather, because it looks just like Iggy Pop. Don't y'all think? I mean, is that not? Yeah, y'all are nodding your head, I can see it. And so on the right is the artist called Untitled, and he's a French artist, French born. He's kind of an outcast for personal reasons. We don't have time to go into all that. And he's painting in his own personal style, scenes of Montmartre. And then there's another artist in this group who's great friends with Modigliani, and his name is Haïm Soutine. I love Soutine. So here you're looking at Modigliani's portrait of Soutine, and then two works by Soutine. And he looked here, for example, he worked in this technique called wet in wet. He was painting in oil paint, so he didn't let one layer dry before he laid down more color. So he's got these loaded wet brushes that are going on. He's just smearing paint on top of wet paint, and it's just kind of all melds in together. And I just love it. So Soutine is another Polish Jew. He's living either in the same building or next door to these other guys in Montparnasse. And They were called les artistes maudits, which meant, the word in Italian is maledetto, and it means kind of cursed or damned. In this sense, it means, like, I think we would say starving artists. These guys were destitute. They were living for their art. You know, they had nothing. They could barely afford to live. They could barely afford paint to paint with. And, you know, they were partying galore. So they were known as, they had this sort of destitute bohemian lifestyle. And they're called les artistes maudits. Interestingly, and just sort of, you know, ironically, Modigliani's nickname is Maudit in Italian. So I actually wrote the words there at the bottom of the screen. So M-A-U-D-I-T is Maudit or Maledetto in French. And then Modigliani is actually referred to as Maudit. That's his nickname. It's the short form of his last name. And in Livorno, they still call him Maudit. They'll just refer to him as if he were just there having a coffee this afternoon. Hey, you want to see Maudit? We're going to see Maudit. So these are his buddies. Obviously, they maybe intellectually have something in common, but their art, they're certainly not participating in a group movement at all. Another thing they have in common here is a person called Leopold Zobrowski. He is another Polish Jew. He is a poet, a writer, an art dealer. He actually is renting out apartments to these guys in Montparnasse. So they kind of meet because of him. They're all renting rooms from Zobrowski. He really sees a lot in Modigliani. He gives Modigliani kind of the peace of mind to be able to paint. He gives him a room to live in. He gives him a studio, materials. He becomes his dealer. And so he then takes the paintings and promotes them. So in 1917, he commissioned a group of reclining nudes from Modigliani, which these are huge paintings. They're about 5 feet by, sort of 4 feet tall, 3.5 feet tall, 5 feet wide. So he commissioned these paintings and then actually made sure that they were shown in an exhibition. There are about 20 or I think 22 of these. So this is a reclining nude. It's painted by Modigliani. I believe this is Jean. He meets Jean in 1917, his companion. So there's a history in Western art. The reclining nude is a recurring theme. And let's just take a quick peek at, over the centuries, how artists depict the reclining nude. You've got Titian, Goya on the bottom, and Manet, 1530s, 1800, 1860s. So it's not a new thing. Here's the way Modigliani does it. So he's really, thinking about his stylized forms, his sculpture, and he's arranged this composition in such a way, very kind of his own formal arrangement. First of all, there's kind of no background. One thing these paintings all have in common is at least some recession into space, lots of recession until the horizon in the case of Titian, and not much at all in the case of Goya, but still there's air in there. There's a lot of space. There's no air here. I'm not even sure what that is behind her. It looks like a panel with a curtain or something, but this woman is sort of on a bed with basically a wall. But the idea is it's a composition that's been divided white on the bottom and dark on the top, and right in the middle is this gorgeous figure. Quite stylized. There's not a straight line in here anywhere except for these angles. Elbow, pillow, elbow. So they kind of repeat. This is kind of a Cézanne thing in a way. Without the structure of these angles, that figure, is kind of not literally, but it's going to figuratively kind of roll off the canvas down to the left. So that kind of anchors her in this white field. And then the figure itself is quite stylized. He's done his thing with the face. And just look at some of the arcs. The whole thing is this kind of an arc, and he's got this swoop of the nose, the back, and then this arm, which kind of links up to the leg here, and then this great arch that just anchors, again, boom, anchors the whole thing. And then the forms of the body too. I mean, he's really, he's kind of working with these formalized ovals. And within that, he's still got a great connection. You see this connection between artist and sitter and between viewer and sitter. I mean, you're making a connection with her, and because there's no depth in space there in the background, she's kind of pushed right up there, right in your face. This kind of freaked people out. And it got even kind of more sort of this intimate lack of space, basically, when he started to truncate the limbs of these figures. Same thing here, very stylized, elongated face, elongated torso, white on the bottom, black on the top, or dark anyway, no straight lines. Everything's very soft and fluid. This is so stylized, it almost looks like he's painting a wooden sculpture. People had a fit. They were scandalized over this nudity. So much so, they had a great exhibition. His first personal exhibition. The police showed up and shut it down. These are the same guys who were, coming out to, kind of throw a flower on his casket 3 years later. So the exhibition is shut down the day that it opens. They were allowed to reopen only if they rehung and got those pictures out of the window. Like, heaven forbid you should look at any naked ladies. Although, really, it's not anything new, right? I mean, here we are. Some of these paintings did cause a fuss. The Goya was sequestered in the Spanish Inquisition. They got over it really fast and put it on a stamp. So Spain wasn't too bothered about that for too long. The Manet, just gorgeous. This caused an uproar in 1863 when it was painted, and she quickly ended up in a museum in Paris. I'm not sure if she was already in the collection of the museum and on public view in 1917 or not. I have a feeling that she was, but in any event, it's not a new thing. So here is another one of these sort of scandalous images. This one, in fact, is super sensual. And, you know, this woman, her eyes are totally black, but she's kind of looking out at you. She's even closer up to the picture plane. There's even less space behind her. It's like you're like right up in there with her, and she is gorgeous. Again, just kind of soft form, soft background, soft hair, soft woman. Everything is just these beautiful kind of rounded forms. Again, super stylized though. Look, the oval here is like an egg, right? Here's another one, here's another one, here's another one. A couple of angles just to kind of keep things kind of formally active, and then this great, beautiful arc. So a little bit of an uproar that might have even given some good PR for Modigliani. He actually, Zobrowski was able to sell one of these paintings, and he sold it for 300 francs. And that was a lifetime record for Modigliani. That's $1,100 of today's dollars. That's how much money he made off of all this. You know, it did not go very far. This particular painting that you're looking at, this is Jeanne, his companion, the mother of his child. This particular painting sold in 2015 at Christie's to a private collector for $170.5 million. Like, go Modigliani, right? And as far as being scandalized, we got no problem with that anymore, because you can just put a good old Modigliani reclining nude right on your face mask. So apparently we've gotten over the scandal as well. So another great thing that Zobrowski does for Jean and Modi is that he takes them to Provence. So 1917, 1918, right in the middle of World War I, the Germans are bombing Paris, and Zobrowski and his wife and kids go down to Provence, and they take a small group of artists with them. I think Soutine was there, and Modi and Jean went down as well. So this was great for them. They had space to work. They're out of Paris, and for Modigliani in particular, his health is horrible. His health is really declining, and just to be in the South, in the warm, breathe the sea air, that really helps him out. And he starts dedicating himself to portraits. And so you can see sort of how he structures these portraits. Super stylized. He's manipulating perspective. He's not given up on backgrounds. He's even got the shadows of the figures here. But he's certainly manipulating how we see these figures. That little girl in the middle, she's kind of less stylized than the other ones. She's so adorable. She was this errand girl, or had gone to, I'm not sure if she's the daughter of Mrs. Anna Zobrowski, Leopold's wife on the right. But she had been sent out to run an errand, and she made an errand. She brought back the wrong thing, and she had been scolded. So she's sort of wringing her hands, and she's all flushed. But she's totally cute with her little blue eyes. And I love the kind of Cezanne-ish qualities that the young boy has, with that kind of raking perspective and the sloped shoulders, the palette, the brushwork, and then Madame Zobrowski on the right with that wonderful asymmetric collar, which forms, kind of that sort of forms the frame around her face with the little kind of that veil in the background and her, beautiful stylized forms. Modigliani painted hundreds of these things, hundreds of portraits like this. He kind of got in with his sitters. This is Elvire, and she was a courtesan that he met somewhere in Cannes, I think, and he painted her dozens of times, or many times, and he's really going for the essence of the person, the sitter, and you can kind of see that there's a connection between painter and sitter here, and he's trying to show us, the viewer, the essence of her humanity. And what he said is that he said, ciò che cerco non è né il reale, né l'irreale, ma l'inconscio. What I'm looking for is not real or unreal, it's the unconscious. He said, I'm looking for the mystery of human instinct. So he's really trying to show you kind of what makes this person tick. So he's really getting to know his sitters. And he does the same thing with Jean. Here's his companion. So they, moved down to Provence with the Zobrowskis and Soutine. She gave birth to a daughter in the South in 1918. They moved back to Paris in 1919. She was pregnant with their second child. This is her portrait. Remember, she's a painter. So this is her portrait of Modigliani, and Modigliani, one of the Modigliani portraits of Jean. 1919, they're back in Paris. She is pregnant again. He has sold some pieces. He's well known in Paris, well known in France. He shows in London, actually sells some pieces in England, and an English critic wrote that Modigliani's portraits have a suspicious resemblance to masterpieces. So he's kind of making it. You know, he's gotten, great renown now in Europe. Really, absolutely, kind of achieved success. That's in late 1919, and then 24th of January 1920, unfortunately, he dies from complications from tuberculosis, and you know how that goes. So the quote on the right is taken from a letter that he wrote in 1905 to one of his fellow artists, and he says, "Your only obligation is to save your dreams," and he really lived that way. He lived with his dreams front and center, and he lived, again, this very intense, brief yet intense life, and left us with a great body of work. So everybody run out to your nearest museum and check out some Modigliani. We're gonna run over to Livorno. Here's his house in Livorno. He was born in this house with the green shutters right here in the middle. The garage door thing is actually right here. That's where the your only obligation is to save your dreams is written. Modi, he's kind of, he's the thing in Livorno, and they really do all call him Modi, as if, we're close personal friends. On the front of the house is this plaque that the city put up in 1959, which is the 75th anniversary of his birth, and it says the painter Amedeo Modigliani was given life, talent, and virtue in this house. And every time I see that, I'm like, he wasn't a painter, he was an artist. What about all that sculpture? They could have been a little more specific, but that's okay. They gave him a plaque. 10 minutes from here is the food market. So I actually went up here yesterday and bought ingredients for our lesson tonight. This great 19th century, huge, big arch space right on the Fosso Reale there with the boats and the reflections. And it's a real food market. It's not a food court like the market in Florence is these days. Like, people actually go here to buy ingredients. The fish is coming in fresh from the fishermen in the sea every day. So I bought some greens, which we're going to use chard, and some seppie. We eat a lot of cephalopods over here. So the two on the bottom are kind of octopus type fish that y'all have seen, moscardini and polpi. And then on the top are calamari, which everybody's familiar with, I think. And then totani, which I've never seen in the United States, but I don't know if it's just because they're really strongly flavored and maybe it's not to our taste. But totani, and then seppie, which is what we're going to make today, which is squid. Those are the guys who have the ink sac. And luckily, the nice guy that I bought these things from cleaned them for me, so I didn't have to deal with all that ink going everywhere, which it was doing. Although he did preserve the ink sac. So here's the recipes we're going to make. We're going to make torta di ceci, which in Livorno is called torta di ceci. And everywhere else here, it's called cecina. But if you say that, they make fun of you what is the word? Mercilessly. So we're going to call it torta di ceci. And we're going to make seppie con bietola, squid with chard. Again, and everywhere else it's called in zimino. It's a typical dish in Tuscany and also in Liguria. And if you call it in zimino in Livorno, you will not eat because they will not bring you any food. You have to call it seppie con bietola, squid with chard. And then we're going to make punch, which they actually make punch because we'll talk about that. But the English foreign nationals who were in the maritime trading companies were making punch, and now in Livorno they eat punch and they drink punch. But it's kind of a special punch, so we're going to make that too. All right, let me stop my share screen here. Okay. So I'm going to whip up first the batter for the torta di ceci, so this is chickpea flour. It's hard to, for some reason, it kind of whites out here, but if I get close enough, you can see it's kind of this golden colored flour. And I know this is kind of getting some notice in the United States these days. It's super healthy. It's ground up dried chickpeas. That's all it is. It's protein. Chickpea flour is used a lot in the Mediterranean basin for street food, and that's what this is. It's kind of a street food. So chickpea flour, salt and pepper, we're making the torta di ceci from Livorno. It's also known as cecciata, cecina, farinata, etc. in Liguria. They make a similar kind of a thing with chickpea flour in Palermo. It's called panelle. And then think about falafel. And there may be others that I don't even know about, but the chickpea flour, for some reason, is really big in the Mediterranean basin. And it's really tasty. And like I said, it's just protein. So this is, I'm going to send you all the recipes tomorrow, but I'm just going to add 2 cups of water. So you can just, I've kind of fluffed this up with the whisk. And it's kind of clumpy, but it breaks up really easily. So just mix it up really well. I prefer a whisk because it really does get clumpy. So if you mix it with a whisk, it'll smooth out. You don't want it to have clumps in it when you bake it. And the trick here, so this is nothing, right? It's chickpea flour and water done. What's really trick here, and the reason that it's so good, is that you let this sit for several hours, even overnight if you want to. And what happens is the same thing that happens when you make bread dough or pizza dough, that autolysis, which is an enzymatic process where basically the cells kind of break down, they kind of break themselves down. And so what happens is here, you get this extremely silky, just silky smooth crepe thing. And so don't skip that step. In fact, I didn't really, this is one of those things like, whatever, I just didn't think that was worth it. I wasn't gonna bother with that. And then I did it one day and I was like, oh, it makes a difference. It makes a difference. So if you wanna make this for supper, make the batter in the morning and then come back to it. And it really does make a difference. So I'm just gonna set this aside and then I'm gonna finish prepping it. It gets a little bit of olive oil and goes into a super hot oven. So I'm gonna go ahead and set this aside and get going with the squid. So here are ingredients for our seppie con bietola squid. There's kind of a procedure here too, which also kind of ensures that these things don't get rubbery, because they can get rubbery. I'm gonna leave that back there. Olive oil, garlic oil. I'm using a really nice, flavorful Tuscan oil. This is from our friends at Fonte de Foiano. I need a knife. And I'm going to put the garlic in. Remember the trick where you just kind of smash the garlic? Let me do this over here. And then we're going to take it out later. This is the most stable surface for this. So I'm going to warm the garlic in the oil, and then I'm going to remove the garlic. So I don't want the garlic to be too small, because I want to be able to get it out of there. I'm going to use black pepper because I think that goes really well with all the different flavors here, but you can also use hot red pepper, just a fresh hot pepper, and you would put it in now. My fire didn't want to start. There it goes. So I'm just going to let the garlic give some flavor to the oil. And I'm going to do this thing with the squid, which is put them in, take them out, and put them back in. And that kind of helps the kind of tissues of the squid, they kind of tighten up, relax, tighten up and relax again, and that really makes them not be rubbery. So my squid has been cleaned. Here he is. He's just a little bit slimy. So here's our lovely squid. He has some little baby tentacles and then a couple of really long ones. And they've taken out the ink sac and some other parts. And so I'm just going to chop this into pieces. The tentacles get cut into sort of 1 or 2 inch pieces. The little kind of squid-like tentacles get cut up into pieces. Let's see if I did this very well. So these are the little tentacles. They're in pieces about that big. Hang on, I'll show you. Well, so it kind of shrinks when it cooks. So that's kind of how big the tentacles are. And then the squid itself, I've cut into 2 big pieces, and I'm just going to cut strips. And the strips are kind of wide, like this. And again, it kind of shrinks when it hits the heat. So you don't want them to be too small. All right, so this is quite hot. I'm just going to throw the squid in and just kind of get them that first, just kind of cook the exterior. And they're going to kind of turn pink. And you'll see they kind of shrink up a little bit. And they just drink up the olive oil. I'm gonna add some more. They also, because they're gonna release a little bit of liquid, which is a lot of flavor. So while they're doing their first little cook, I'm gonna prepare the greens. So we're using chard. You can also use spinach for this recipe. And this is the chard from my vegetable growers. They just yank it right out of the ground. So I'm going to get rid of the big stems. I'm only going to use the leaves. Seppie, the squid are in season from now, basically like last week until April. So at a certain point, we'll no longer have chard, but we'll have spinach. So you can use spinach in that recipe as well. So from here, they just get chopped into sort of, 1-inch strips or so. And if your chard is super tough, you might want to steam it or boil it first to kind of make it soft. But this is tender enough that it's just going to wilt. Just with the heat and a little bit of liquid. So I'm going to take these out. I'm also going to turn the heat up a tiny bit. So they've done their first, kind of the first cooking. Smells so good. It already smells like you could just eat it. The kind of sea flavor of the squid and the garlic is perfect together. I was warned by a chef, Livorno, I told you they're so funny. A cook at one of the restaurants right outside the market gave me some tips. The guy who sold the squid gave me some tips, and the guy who was buying some squid gave me some tips too. So I heard everybody's version of how to do this. I'm going to go ahead and take the garlic out. You could do that later, but it's pretty hot, so I think it's given enough of its flavor, and I don't want it to burn because that would just ruin everything, so I'm taking the garlic out. So into the hot pan goes all of the chard. It's kind of a lot. And there's, I rinsed it really well. There's a little bit of liquid. I'm going to go ahead and give that in here too. That'll just help it wilt. Another piece. So if you don't have squid, well, first of all, one of the things I was told, 2 things. One is don't use too much salt. So I'm going to put in just a little bit of salt. And the same person who told me that, she said that these are kind of salty. So just the salt water in the squid, they actually have salt. She also told me that she prefers to use these frozen. She buys them fresh and actually freezes them and then unfreezes them to cook them because she said they're more tender that way, or it's easier not to make them rubbery. So this method that I'm showing you is perfect. You get really tender squid, but you can also use frozen squid. So if you can't find fresh squid, you can use frozen squid. Or you could use, Lorenzo makes, Lorenzo, what do you use when you make?
Normally at my works, we use a lampredotto to make inzimino. Lampredotto is the typical street food from Florence and is like tripe, is the fourth stomach of the cow that you can eat only in Florence. And we cook in the same way with bietole and in inzimino, and it's very interesting.
He's quarantined. He calls it inzimino. And again, I tried to order inzimino in Livorno, and I almost didn't get any supper because they're not giving you any inzimino. You have to call it something else. But it's the same exact recipe, and it gives tomato, which we're about to put in there.
And it's curious that you can call inzimino or inzimino in one word.
No one's really sure where that comes from. They think it means cut up in pieces. And they think it's from an Arabic word that means cut up in pieces, which maybe it is. It's an extremely old recipe. So he makes it with lampredotto. I'm making it with squid, which is the traditional Livornese recipe. You can make it with bacala, which is the salt cod. You can also make it with chickpeas. You probably make it with potatoes would probably be good. And you can use any other fish as well. I asked the fish guy, and he's like, well, you could use calamari, but the calamari has such a totally different taste. You just wouldn't dare put calamari together with the chard. I'm like, yeah, I think you can just put the calamari together with the chard. So we don't have to be quite so sort of specific about it. So you can use another fish. Obviously, you would have to adjust your cooking times, right? So the greens are wilted. I'm gonna add the squid back. Again, all their liquid, I don't want to lose any of that.
Elaine, Lorenzo, did you say you use tripe?
Yeah, it's a kind of a tripe. You know, cow have fourth stomach, and the first and the second are the white part of the stomach is tripe in Italy, and the fourth, the last one, is lampredotto, is the abomasum, and we cook, we boil in a broth, vegetable broth, and we serve in the sandwiches.
Okay.
And you can make also in this way, in inzimino.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You can find only in Florence. It's very interesting.
All the edible cow stomach. When y'all come, next time y'all are in Florence, all of y'all, we're gonna go. Lorenzo actually has a little spot where he makes lampredotto sandwiches and lampredotto inzimino. He's a lampredotto is what he is. So we'll be going there next time y'all come to Florence. We can go visit Lorenzo at work. All right, so I've tossed everything through here. I've added black pepper because I think black pepper is the way to go here. And I'm gonna add some tomatoes. So the idea of tomatoes and fish is, hang on. Oh. So this is that passata. Remember the tomato passata? It's just tomatoes that have been put through a food mill. And I made this one, and it's just so yummy. It's also super liquidy because I didn't boil it down enough. So if you're going to use one you made in the store, you bought in the store, excuse me, you might have to add some water, but I'm not adding water because it's already like super liquidy. So I'm just going to add like that much. Lorenzo, che dici ancora? Maybe some more.
No, io non ne metterei più.
Okay.
It's enough.
Okay. So it's pretty liquidy. Again, if I had used store-bought tomato, I'd probably add a little bit of water. And now this just gets everything mixed together really well. Ma sei sicuro? I'm gonna put it in a tiny bit more. This doesn't look red enough. And then I'm gonna let this cook on low temperature, and it's gonna go for about 40 minutes. It kind of reduces down. It makes, it's not soupy when you're done. You don't, I mean, it's a little liquid, it has some liquid, but you don't serve it like a soup. And here I have one that I made in advance. And can you, if I can pick this up without burning myself, I'm gonna show you what color, because it has taken on totally different color. So look at this one, can y'all see the color? It's kind of like fresh red and green, right? It's like the Italian flag. And then here's what it looks like after it's done. So it's everything is, I'm trying to get some good light. Y'all can see that. It just all cooks down and makes just, the flavors come together in a way that is just kind of hard to describe. It's really, really strong flavored and super yummy. So a curiosity here about the tomatoes is the idea of tomatoes with fish is kind of a particular thing. And I do this a lot in Livorno. And it's interesting because tomatoes were actually brought into Livorno by the Sephardic Jews who came from Spain. So tomatoes came into Europe after Christopher Columbus landed in the Americas. And so slowly but surely, some of the, chocolate, tomatoes, all these, different kind of foods made their way over to the old world. The Europeans thought that tomatoes were poisonous, and they used them for decorative plants. They were ornamental. And at some point, the Spanish realized that actually they were kind of tasty. And then slowly, the Spanish coming from out of Spain into Italy brought tomatoes with them. And tomatoes did enter Livorno in that way. I don't think that was the only point of contact for the tomato. I don't think that Livorno was the gateway of the tomato into Italy. I think maybe they also, Naples was a huge port as well, as was Genoa. So I think Palermo, the tomatoes probably came in kind of at the same time into some of these places. But it's interesting that the Jewish citizens actually of Livorno brought tomatoes in. And here we are with our great Livornese recipe, mixing fish and tomatoes. Right, so
Elaine, is the tomato, is that just tomatoes? It's not tomato paste.
It's called passata. It's past. But all it means is tomatoes that have been boiled very, very briefly, and they have been passed through a food mill that takes away all the seeds and the skin and then poured into a jar. No salt, no oil, nothing. That's it. And then sealed. And it tastes just like you take a bite out of a tomato. It's a really good way to preserve that flavor. I'm gonna stick the our torta di ceci in the oven. So this is a batter that I made earlier today. It's been sitting here for several hours, so it ought to be nice and creamy. So this gets, the batter gets 3 tablespoons of oil, and the pan gets 3 tablespoons of oil. And then you want to stir it up really good because some of the flour kind of floats to the bottom, sinks to the bottom, that is. So I'm using really good, yummy, rich Tuscan olive oil. So I've added salt and black pepper, and then I just added olive oil. So this is like pure protein here. Sometimes I actually turn these into pancakes. I don't know why. Sometimes instead of making the huge torte, I just literally cook them in a pan like you would cook a pancake. And it's kind of a good side dish. You can put it next to anything, just like you would eat beans. Only it's tastier with all the oil and salt. All right, you could use a brush, but I'm going to painstakingly roll it around in here. So it goes into an oven. It's 220 degrees Celsius, which I think is 400 or maybe even more, 415 Fahrenheit. And it cooks for 25 minutes or so. And it's really good. And Lorenzo, questo si mangia un po' anche a parte.
Yeah. In Livorno, there's a way to eat cecina that they ask 5 and 5 because when we have lire and we don't have euro, we buy 5 lire of focaccia and 5 lire of cecina, and we put cecina between 2 slices of focaccia. It's with a lot of black pepper, and it's very incredible. It is very
good, and it's really similar to a panino con le panelle. Anyone?
Yeah, it's very similar. Yeah,
panino con le panelle. So yeah. Panelle they make a chickpea flour dough, and they basically spread it out and let it kind of gel. They cut that into pieces and deep fry it. It kind of gets flaky, and then you can just eat them that way, or you can put it into a sandwich. Tons of lemon juice in that case, and then you eat the panino con le panelle, and it's kind of like a truck driver lunch because it just, it's like it just is complete carbs and beans, and it's really very filling. And they also, by the way, in Palermo or in Sicily anyway, will use in Western Sicily, will use a little bit of fennel flour in their panelle panelle batter, and it's really good. And I have done that before with the torta di ceci, and Lorenzo yelled at me because that's not allowed. Giusto?
Giusto.
All right, we're gonna make punch, and this is cracks me up. I did not know this was a thing, but it's a thing. And in Livorno, they actually have poncerie. That means a place to go get punch. And so that is so funny. What it is, I mean, literally from these English nationals who came in. Actually, it needs some coffee. I want to make coffee first. Just a coffee first.
Yeah. You have tried punch before the lesson. You have tried punch before the lesson.
See,
You're very smiling. You're very smiling now.
This has got a large kick to it. It's more rum than anything else. It's like a hot rum drink. It's really good for winter. They're so funny. I was in the market and I went to talk to some guy who actually has a really good olive oil selection. Luann O'Laughlin, if you're still on the line, extremely good. He knows all the folks. Anyway, we were talking and I mentioned to him about the punch I was going to make. And he actually sold me this is rum. This is a kind of a rum. It's kind of a fake rum, actually. So punch is supposed to be made with rum. And in Livorno, they have this fake rum that they make in Livorno. It's a proprietary recipe, so we don't really know what it is because they don't have to tell. But it's really alcoholic. Anyway, so I wanted to taste one of his punches. He's like, well, you can't because it's not the right time of day. And I was like, can you just let me taste the punch, please? And so of course it is like this alcoholic, like, whoa. And so I took a sip, I'm like, whoa. And he's like, why don't you save that for later? And he poured it into a bottle so I could take it home. I'm like, actually, I drank that last night though. I did not drink that tonight. I want to drink this one tonight.
And the important is not to throw away a very good rum for the punch.
Yeah. Although it would, you can use the good rum.
Yeah, but not very good.
Coffee on here. And then so the deal is you dissolve sugar. He also said you can't make that at home. It just doesn't go about right because you dissolve the sugar in rum with some lemon zest, and they do it using the steam thing from a coffee machine, which of course I don't have, and so Kent, I had my La Marzocco. The La Marzocco shop, we have a La Marzocco guy on the line today. So the La Marzocco machines obviously have the little steam vent, which you put into the glass and it melts all of the sugar into the rum. I, of course, don't have that, so I'm just gonna do it over the flame. And my buddy Alessandro, the olive oil salesman, told me that was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard of, but that's okay, we're doing it. So rum, lemon juice, and a decent amount of sugar.
Lemon zest, not lemon juice.
Grazie zest, lemon zest, and my hilarious ponce livornese. I've never been to a ponceria, but I want to go. So I'm just going to put this over the same flame. So the idea is once the sugar melts, you add coffee, and it's basically half hot rum and half coffee, and another thing, you have to have it in a little glass. And this isn't quite the proper glass, but I'm hoping they're going to give me a break on that. So while this is melting, why don't we serve up everything? Giusto, Lorenzo?
Yeah.
So I'm going to switch my camera view. What do I need? I need some garlic. Okay, I'm going to move y'all over to the plating banco here. Well, come, così va bene?
Bene, benissimo.
Sì? Okay.
Okay.
Torta di ceci. So here is the torta di ceci when it comes out of the oven. And it's just nice and golden. And I'm hoping it hasn't stuck to the bottom. I asked the guy who sold me the flour. I said, sometimes it sticks. And he goes, yeah, sometimes it sticks. That's what he said. I thought maybe there was a way around that, but apparently not. So this is really, like we said, street food. And you just either stand on the sidewalk with a sandwich or just walk down the street and eat it. So it's not fancy. It doesn't have to go on a plate. Didn't stick. I'm going to serve it the way they serve it, which is on a napkin. Only I don't have a paper napkin, and I don't want to, well, we'll just go ahead. We're going for it. This is way fancier than you'd get. This is linen. You would not be getting a linen napkin in Livorno, believe me. So this is something you basically eat with a beer, right? I want to see, can y'all see the creamy, look at the creamy cross section? Can y'all see that?
Yeah.
It's so good. The creamy cross section is because I let it sit there for 3 hours. So that's the benefit of letting it sit, is that it's just this creamy, it's just yummy.
You have to add a lot of black pepper.
There's a little bit in here, it's sunk. It's sunk to the bottom. You can add more on top. So this is really good, hanging out by that canal called the Fosso Reale with a beer. That's how you eat this. All right, let's check out the Enzimino. So I'm going to serve this one. Che dici? Me lo metto
Pane?
sul pane dentro or come?
Poi we usually serve the slices of bread with inzimino or like a crostone. You can serve in both ways.
I'm going to make a fake tonta because I think that sounds good. So I have
Yeah.
a nice, beautiful loaf of bread that I got in that great market over in Livorno, and I made some toast. And so to make fake tonta, and this is something that we usually make in November when new olive oil comes in. So you'll be seeing me do this again. You just take a raw clove of garlic and rub it across a piece of toast. Devo mettere sale or posso sal?
No.
My salt. Can I skip the salt?
No?
Oh. He said no. I went to get the salt. So garlic, salt, a lot of salt, because it's a big thick piece of bread, and then a ton of olive oil. Yummy Sagona olive oil. So I'm going to serve that in, I'm going to serve the seppie and bietola in a bowl. You could actually put this on the bottom, put the bread on the bottom and serve this on top, but I kind of like it like this. And then, and this is how I eat most of my food actually, is with a swirl of fresh olive oil on top. So this has been, I didn't use a ton of olive oil in cooking because I really don't want it to be greasy, and I cannot stand when the oil absorbs all that tomato and turns into that red greasy stuff. To me, that loses, the tomato doesn't taste good anymore and the oil doesn't taste good anymore either. So I on purpose did not use too much oil in the cooking, but I added some fresh oil on top, and you'll notice that it really brings out all of the, it kind of brings the flavors together and brings the flavors out. And a lot of times when I serve stuff here in these classes, I realize that I've been skipping that step, and then when I go to eat it myself, I put olive oil on top. So instead of putting salt on top, I put olive oil on top. Olive oil literally enhances the flavors of everything that it comes into contact with. And it's also really good for you. So instead of putting salt on it, you can just put olive oil on it. So there's your seppie and bietola, squid and chard. And it is really good. And this is tosta, giusto, Lorenzo?
Yeah.
Flavor here, this is a very strong flavor. Just all those ingredients together and the squid itself. I mean, the squid cooked in this way still tastes like the ocean. It's great, but once it's cooked down with the tomato, it is quite strong. So you want to think about what to eat along with it. And basically, it doesn't really need anything else except for a glass of wine or a punch. The punch comes later. But I'm not sure. Can we just drink a beer with this? What do you think, Lorenzo?
I prefer white wine.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Well, then I would use a white wine like this, which is, Timorasso, Dertona di Timorasso, which is kind of an unctuous white wine. So I would actually prefer, if I was going to drink wine with this, I think I would prefer kind of an aggressive red.
Yeah, but yeah, I want to say it's normally we say that we don't drink red wine in fish dish, but in this case you can use a very good red wine.
Or you can even use just a very kind of even a scrappy red wine, such as I was thinking, You know that there's a wine called Raboso, a red wine from Veneto.
Yeah.
And it's kind of almost kind of raspy. It's got a lot of tannin and acidity, and that would kind of stand up to the tomatoes and kind of cut through. But I guess the fish itself is kind of unctuous. So to me, I was thinking kind of a raspy red wine. Oh, here's my punch. Half a glass of sweetened rum, and you can't leave out your lemon zest. And then top it off with coffee. And there you go. Punch. Livorno.
Hot or is it cold?
It's hot.
Okay.
It's hot. It's good for winter. So, do y'all have any questions or comments or ideas for how to maybe translate these recipes if you can't get a hold of squid?
Did you use espresso or did you use coffee?
Espresso.
Espresso.
I want to come over and eat some.
Okay. Get it on. Come on.
Elaine, when you mention chard, is it Swiss chard in United States?
Yeah, Swiss chard, and it comes in either, I don't have any left, I cooked it all. It comes with
the red stalk?
Also, sometimes it comes in colored stalks, you can use that. And what you want to do though is sometimes it comes with these really wide stalks. You don't want to cook that wide white part, you want to kind of cut the stalk off.
Right.
Younger ones, you know, the more tender, the better. Like I said, if you get chard that's not super tender, you might want to steam it first, just to make sure that it cooks all the way. Although it cooks for 45 minutes, it's going to cook down.
Yeah, I saw that yours was very tender, very young.
Mm-hmm.
And here, I didn't see it. But anyway, I know now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What are the fishes that you can use instead of calamari?
You can use bacala, the salt cod. What other, you could use?
Excuse me, squid. You use squid, right?
I use squid. You could also use calamari, although the fish guy thought that would be, you know, not strong of a flavor enough, but I think it would be fine. Or you can use bacala, or what other fishes could we use? Some kind of a, more of a, kind of even a strongly flavored fish, but if you use something flaky, you would have to throw it in at the last minute because otherwise it would just come apart. So you need something that would hold it. Any ideas out there? No.
What about swordfish?
You could do a swordfish. I think you could try that. I mean, I think it would have a totally different flavor, but I mean, it's still, I think it would work.
I think it's not only a problem of flavor. The problem is the way to cook. So, for example, for me, you can use also octopus, but you cannot cook in the same way. For example,
No.
you have to boil it before. For example.
And someone said, how about monkfish? That would be good too, but I'm not super familiar. Is that flaky enough that it would fall apart? Would you have to add that at the last minute? You may have to add it kind of at the very end of cooking. If you use a fish that's going to fall apart, you would add it at the end of cooking and very gently fold it through there. Those fish usually cook pretty quickly as well. So you would add that at the end and not the beginning.
The monkfish is really akin to lobster in a way, so it's not flaky.
Oh, so it would hold up. Okay, good. Yeah, that's a good suggestion because I know you can get that.
In fact, monkfish is known as poor man's lobster.
Oh, that would definitely work. Yeah, for sure.
And maybe a good thick piece of grouper too, but not.
That's flaky. Yeah, you'd have to be careful. That would fall apart, I think. So, but I mean, you can just play with it. Just watch your cooking times, and add the fish at the appropriate moment. And so this is a great way to sort of, get this. Meanwhile, no calories, right? Fish, tomatoes, and the greens, super flavorful, really healthy, no calories, except for the bread and all that oil. But other than that, so.
What about like a langostino or even shrimp? Would that just change it too much?
I don't know that shrimp are. I don't know. Maybe. Lorenzo, what do you think? Gamberi?
Yeah, I haven't understand.
Gamberi? Si potrebbe mettere gamberi or no?
No. The flavor is very.
It would be.
It's not so strong for me.
I think shrimp are kind of good. I wouldn't put shrimp with the tomatoes. I think that would kind of, to me, you're losing the good part of the shrimp that way.
Would trout be too flaky? What about trout? Would it be too flaky? I'm trying to think of something that's oily.
Well, it's too flaky, but you could just put it in later. You know, just put it in at the end. Or maybe even do that thing like you kind of just sear it in the beginning just to leave a little flavor in the pan. Or, you know what I would do is I would use a piece and just let it fall apart for the flavor during cooking. And at the very end, I'd add in the portions, right? That way you could spread the flavor out a little bit without, but still maintain some actual pieces of fish. So y'all play with it.
Hey, the calories from olive oil don't count.
They're good
No.
calories. Those are good. It's the good calories for you. Good fat. Monounsaturated. Tons of vitamins. You know, another thing about olive oil, I think we mentioned this before, but I'm just going to repeat it since it's olive oil season. So I'm thinking about all this stuff. Olive oil actually makes all the nutrients and the other ingredients available to your body, like the vitamin D and the greens. The olive oil like helps your body actually get to them.
Really?
Speaking of seasons, Elaine, what about the tartufo? You should do a show with.
I'm kind of trying to figure out how to do that. My idea, I think, because I have a truffle hunter nearby, and sometimes when people come to visit, we actually go truffle hunting. So maybe we'll do a virtual truffle hunt.
Yeah, well,
Awesome.
it'd be good to maybe go out on a truffle hunt.
I know, I was
That'd be great.
trying to figure out how to do that. And what we could maybe do if Lorenzo is up for it is leave Lorenzo in the kitchen with the truffle hunter's wife. Okay. And so I go out
You better ask the truffle hunter.
I should probably check with him. So I can go out and hunt truffles, but I would do it. So I could come back with the truffles and then Lorenzo would already be in there like making stuff with Christina.
Yeah.
Truffle, and then we could just eat a bunch of truffles. We can make truffle, and it'd be good. We might do that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Good idea, yes.
Yeah, this is the season. We can do
I
that.
second that. Yes, good idea. Buona
Okay.
idea.
Buona idea, brava.
Excellent. All right, y'all, I've kind of kept y'all on a little bit long today. Any more questions before we say goodbye?
I'm glad to be here, and it's a lot better than football.
Please,
Grazie mille,
yes.
grazie mille, Elaine.
This is
Bravo.
The
Wait a minute,
best
that's
compliment.
the best compliment I've gotten since we started.
Bravo, yes.
That's awesome.
Bravissima, bravissima. E bravissimo,
Sì, sì.
Lorenzo.
Thank
you. We love you.
Elaine,
Thank you.
ho appena ordinato il tuo libro su Sicilia.
Cosa?
I have ordered the book
Oh.
in Sicily just last night.
Oh, good, perfect. Yeah, I wrote a guidebook to Sicily, so Maria Luisa has ordered it. Allora andiamo in Sicilia tutti.
Yes,
Ready? Whenever y'all want to go to Sicily, I'm ready. Let's go.
right.
Well,
Okay.
y'all, thank you for coming, and I hope to see y'all
Ciao,
here
ciao tutti.
again soon. Ciao a tutti.
Ciao a tutti, grazie.
Ciao.
Grazie.
Bye, everybody. Ciao.
Ciao.
Arrivederci, Elaine. Ciao.
Arrivederci.
Oh,
Thank
Ciao.
you're welcome. Bye, y'all.
Bye.